In this video, I'm going to be showing you exactly how to crochet this top that I'm currently wearing. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's quickly go over materials. So for this top, we're obviously gonna need some yarn. So this is the yarn that I'm gonna be using for making this top. And this yarn is a fingering weight superwash merino yarn. And then we're gonna need a hook, and I'm using a 4mm size hook. Then we're gonna need some scissors, and I'm just using my little mini scissors here. Then we're gonna need a darning needle. We'll need a few stitch markers. And then we're also gonna need some measuring tape to take our measurements. So for this top, we're gonna be making a front and back panel. So both panels are gonna be almost identical except for the neckline. So the first thing we have to do is take our measurements, and we wanna measure all the way around our bust. Since our bust is the largest area of our torso, we have to measure all the way around. So just like this right here, all the way around. And as you can see, my bust measurement is 32 inches all the way around. And we're gonna take this measurement, so mine is 32 inches, and we're gonna divide it by 2. So if I divide my 32-inch measurement by 2, then I end up with 16 inches. And this measurement is the one we're gonna be using for making this top. So 16 inches is the measurement that I have to remember. So this measurement right here, so mine is 16 inches, is how long we're gonna wanna make each one of our panels across this way. So each one of my panels, the front and back panel, is gonna be 16 inches across. So I'm just gonna place my measuring tape here. So I'm gonna start by making a long chain, and this is gonna be our foundation chain. And I need to make this foundation chain the length of our horizontal length that we measured earlier. So mine is 16 inches here, so I need my foundation chain to measure the length of my 16-inch measurement here. Okay, so here's the thing. Since we're using the mesh stitch for making this top, our foundation chain will have to be made up of multiples of 3 plus 2. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to start by making a slip knot. And I'm going to slip that loop onto my hook and tighten it. And now I'm going to crochet my first multiple of 3. So 1, 2, 3. So that right there is a multiple of 3. And now I'm going to do another multiple of 3. So 4, 5, and 6. So that is a total of 2 multiples of 3. So now I'm going to do another multiple of 3. 7, 8, and 9. So I'm just going to continue making my chain in multiples of 3 plus 2. So I just finished making my chain, and my chain is a total of 90 chain stitches long. And 90 chain stitches gets me pretty much exactly 16 inches. So when measuring your chain up against your measurement, you don't want to stretch it out. You just want to lay it down loosely and hold it up against your measurement. And as you can see here, this is the start of my measuring tape, and this is 16 inches right here. And my chain is 16 inches long. And just to explain the whole multiples of 3 concept just a little further, so my chain right here is 90 chain stitches long, and since the number 90 is divisible by 3, that's how I know that this chain is made up of multiples of 3. So however many chain stitches that you have in your chain, as long as it's divisible by 3, that's how you know that your chain is made up of multiples of 3. So once your chain reaches the length of your measurement across, we're then gonna add 2 more chains. So 1, 2. So remember earlier when I mentioned that our chain has to be made up of multiples of 3 and then plus 2 at the end? The 2 chains that I just did right here are the 2 chains at the end that I mentioned earlier that we would do. So now I have a total of 92 chain stitches in my foundation chain. And when we break it down further, 90 is divisible by 3 and then plus 2 at the very end. And now I'm going to show you how to crochet the mesh stitch. So now I'm going to turn around and work my way down the chain this way. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to yarn over, and we're going to skip the next 7 chains and insert our hook into the 8th chain from our hook. So I'm going to count 7 chains from my hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to skip these 7 chains and insert into the next chain right here, the 8th chain from our hook right here. So I'm going to insert here, and now I'm going to double crochet And that's what that should look like. So this is our very first mesh stitch. And now I'm going to chain 2, yarn over, and now we're going to skip the next 2 chains in our foundation chain and insert into the 3rd chain. So we're going to insert into this 3rd chain right here. So skip these 2 and insert into the 3rd and double crochet. So what we just did is the stitch we're going to be doing down this entire foundation chain, but I'm going to do it one more time with you. So chain 2, 1, 2, skip the next 2 chains in the foundation chain. So these chains right here, skip those and insert into the 3rd chain and double crochet. So now just continue down the rest of the foundation chain using the stitch that we just did for these 2 squares right here. Okay, so I'm almost done row 1, but I'm just gonna do my last stitch of row 1 with you guys here on camera. So I'm just gonna chain 2, 1, 2, yarn over, and skip the next 2 chains here and insert my hook into my very last chain right here and double crochet. So now row 1 is complete, and this is what it should look like. And now we're going to start row 2. So we're going to start row 2 by making a chain of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this right here is our chain of 5, and now I'm going to turn my work around. And now I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to insert my hook into the top of the next double crochet stitch. So not this one right here, because we just worked out of this double crochet stitch on the end here, but into the next double crochet stitch, which is this one right here. So I'm just going to insert into the top of it and double crochet. And that's what that should look like. And now I'm just going to continue crocheting this mesh stitch down the row for row 2. So I'm just gonna chain 2, yarn over, and insert my hook into the top of the next double crochet. And now the next double crochet is this one right here, because we just inserted into this last one right here. So I'm just gonna insert my hook into the top of this double crochet stitch and double crochet. So now we're gonna continue working down this row, doing the same stitch that I did right here. So I'm gonna do it one more time with you. So chain 2, yarn over, insert our hook into the top of the next double crochet stitch and double crochet. So our chain 2 and double crochet into the next stitch is one complete stitch. So now we're just going to continue doing what we just did for these 2 stitches here down the rest of the row, and then I'll come back once I've reached the end of row 2. So I've almost reached the end of row 2. I just have one more stitch left to do, and I'm going to crochet this stitch with you here on camera. So this one's just a little bit different. We're going to be working into this turning chain here. So I'm just going to chain 2 and skip the next 2 chains and insert into the 3rd chain. So I'm going to skip these 2 chains right here and insert into this 3rd chain right here. So the first chain right here can be a little hard to see, but make sure you don't miss it. So this is a chain, and that is a chain, and we're inserting into this 3rd chain here. So I'm inserting my hook and doing a double crochet stitch. And that's the end of row 2. And now I'm going to start row 3. So I'm going to start it the same way that I started row 2. So I'm going to make a chain of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to turn our work around. And now I'm going to do the same thing that we did for row 2. So I'm just going to do the first few stitches here on camera. So I'm just going to double crochet into the top of this next double crochet stitch here. Chain 2, double crochet into the top of the next double crochet stitch, and double crochet, chain 2, insert into the top of the next double crochet, and so on and so on. So we're just going to continue to do this again down the entire rest of the row for row 3. I'm almost done row 3, just going to do the last stitch with you guys here on camera, since it's the stitch that is done a little differently since we're inserting into this turning chain here. So chain 2 as per usual, yarn over, and now we're going to skip the next 3 chains and insert into the third. And don't forget this funny looking first chain here that can sometimes be hard to see. So we're skipping 1, 2, and inserting into the third chain and doing a double crochet stitch. And that's the end of row 3. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly show you this top right here. This is another top that I crocheted, and I crocheted it the same way that I'm crocheting the yellow mesh top that I'm showing you how to crochet in this video. So what I've just showed you how to do is the first 3 rows at the bottom of this top here. And now, for the next little while, I'm gonna be crocheting the distance from here to here before we start creating the sleeve hole right here. So this is what I have so far. And pretty much from here to here, this length right here is pretty straightforward. We're just going to be doing exactly the same thing that I just showed you how to do for row 2 and row 3. And we're just going to do that from where we are here to the bottom of our armholes. And this length right here totally depends on the look that you're going for. I'm going to show you another mesh top that I made. And it is this white mesh top right here. It's a little hard to see because it blends in with my bed underneath, but hopefully you can see. This is the underarm of the white mesh top. From the bottom of the underarm to the bottom of the top, this section right here is a lot shorter than this darker top underneath here. It's actually significantly shorter. This is the base of the underarm of the darker top right here, and this is the base of the underarm of the white top. And the bottom of both tops are aligned. So this white top has a significantly shorter section here compared to the darker top. So with that said, this white mesh top is a crop top, and this darker top is not a crop top. It is definitely longer. So the length of the section that we're about to do determines the length of your top. So I'm gonna work this section off camera since the rows are pretty straightforward. And then I'll come back once I'm ready to show you how to do the sleeve holes. I just finished crocheting all the rows for the lower section of the back panel, and I ended up doing a total of 20 rows for this section of the top here. So from here to here is a total of 20 rows. And just remember that this section of the panel will cover from your underarms and downwards. And now that we have this section here completed, we're gonna start decreasing along the sides right here to start doing some shaping for our armholes. So we're gonna be doing 1 decrease at each end, so this end and this end, of every other row. So not every row, but every other row. If we decrease every single row, it cuts in too quickly. So by doing it every other row, it kind of has less of an intense curve inward. So we're gonna be doing 1 decrease at each end of every other row to create a little bit of a slant inwards like this. And the amount of decrease rows that you choose to do depends on the shape that you're going for. For example, this top right here, I did a total of 3 decrease rows to create this shape going in like this. And then compared to this white top that I made, for my white top, I did a total of 4 decrease rows. So if you look here, my white top goes in a little bit more. My white top is also a little longer this way than my darker top underneath. So it looks like it lines up here, but if you look on the sides here, my top is actually a little bit wider here. So keeping this in mind, the amount of decrease rows that you choose to do will determine this shape right here by the armholes. So if you do more decrease rows, it'll cinch in a little bit more. And then if you do less decrease rows, it'll just create a little less shaping here. And if you really wanted to, you could just avoid doing any decrease rows altogether, and then you would just have a top that goes like straight up and down, which works as well. But for the sake of this tutorial, I will be showing you how to decrease to create this shape right here. I'm hoping all of that made sense, but now I'm gonna show you how to decrease. Okay, so I'm just at the end of my 20th row here. And now I'm gonna start my next row, which is gonna be a decrease row. So I'm gonna start with a decrease. And to do that, I'm just going to crochet a chain of 3. So 1, 2, and 3. And usually we have to crochet a chain of 5 here, but since we're starting this row here with a decrease, we're just making a chain of 3. And by doing that, we will be creating a decrease stitch. So now I'm gonna turn my work around, yarn over, and double crochet into the top of the next double crochet stitch. And double crochet. And now I'm just going to continue down the rest of the row doing the same thing as usual, just creating a regular mesh stitch until I reach the very end, and then we'll do a decrease stitch into this last stitch here. So I'm going to work down the rest of this row off camera, and then I'll come back once I'm ready to do the next decrease stitch. Okay, so I just finished working my way down our first decrease row. So here was my first decrease, and now I've reached this point here. And as you can see, I just worked my way up until I had just 2 squares left in the previous row. And now at this point here, we're gonna do another decrease. So first, I'm going to make my regular chain of 2, and I'm gonna yarn over, and I'm gonna act as if I'm about to do my next stitch, just my regular double crochet stitch into the next stitch here, but we're actually gonna do a decrease. So I'm gonna insert my hook into the top of this double crochet stitch, hook my yarn, pull it through, and as you can see, I have 3 loops on my hook here. And before doing my double crochet stitch, I'm actually going to now skip the next 2 chains. So skip this one here and this one, and insert my hook into the 3rd chain. So with 3 loops still on my hook, I'm going to insert my hook into the 3rd chain and pull my yarn through. And now I have 4 loops on my hook. And now I'm going to hook my yarn and pull it through the first 3 loops until I have just 2 loops left on my hook. And now I'm going to hook my yarn again and pull it through the last 2 loops. And all of that creates a decrease. So I've just completed the first decrease row. So we did a decrease at the start of the row here by making a chain of 3, and then we did a decrease at the end of the row by double crocheting 2 stitches together. And now our next row isn't gonna have any decrease stitches, it's just gonna be a regular row. So I'm just gonna turn around and double crochet down this row without any decreases, since we're doing a decrease row every other row. So now I'm going to make a chain of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Turn my work around, yarn over, and double crochet into the next double crochet stitch. So I'm going to insert my hook into the top of that double crochet and double crochet. And that's what that looks like. And now I'm just going to continue working my way down the row, doing the same thing as usual. And I'm going to do that off camera, and then I'll come back once I've reached the end of the row. I just reached the end of the row after our first decrease row. And I'm just going to show you how to crochet into the end of this row here where the decrease stitch is in the previous row. So if you look here, this is the first decrease stitch of the previous row, and it's the decrease stitch where we did a chain of 3. So this chain right here is a decrease stitch, which means we're going to be making a chain of 2, 1, 2, and double crocheting into this next double crochet stitch right here. But then this chain of 3, we're not inserting into any of it. So I'm just going to do that. So I have my yarn over, insert my hook into the next double crochet stitch, and double crochet. And that's the last stitch of this row. So usually we have a chain of 5 here, and we skip 2 chains and insert into the 3rd for our last stitch. But since in the previous row we started with a decrease stitch, that means we won't be inserting into the turning chain this time. So that's what that looks like. So now I've just completed our first decrease row and then the regular row after that. So now the next row, we're going to be doing our second decrease row. So we're going to be doing our second decrease row the same way that we did our first decrease row, and I'm going to do it one more time with you guys. So we're going to start with a chain of 3. So 1, 2, and 3. We're going to turn our work around, and we're going to yarn over and double crochet into the next stitch, which is this stitch right here. And double crochet. And that's our first decrease stitch, and now I'm going to continue working my way down this row, doing our regular stitch. So chain 2, double crochet into the next double crochet stitch. I just reached the end of the second decrease row, and we're going to be doing a decrease at the end of the row here, and I'm going to show you how to do it one more time on camera. Also, don't mind these little loose ends here. I had to feed in some new yarn in my previous row, but yeah, so just ignore these. Okay, so I have my chain 2 already done, and now I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to insert my hook into the next double crochet stitch right here as if I'm going to create a double crochet stitch I'm gonna hook my yarn and pull it through so that I have 3 loops on my hook. But instead of hooking my yarn and pulling it through the loops to create a double crochet stitch, first we're gonna insert our hook again. And so I'm gonna skip the next 2 chains. So 1, 2, we're skipping and inserting into the 3rd. And now I'm gonna hook my yarn and pull it through. And now I have 4 loops on my hook. So now I'm gonna hook my yarn and pull it through the first 3 loops until I have just 2 loops left on my hook. And now I'm gonna hook my yarn again, and I'm gonna pull it through the last 2 loops on my hook. And that's how we do the second decrease. So that's the end of our second decrease row. So just a little refresher here. So we do a decrease stitch at each end of every other row. And as you've probably noticed, each decrease stitch is different, and that's based on the direction that we're crocheting. And since we're doing a decrease row every other row, the way that it lines up is that the start of every row, the decrease is made by crocheting a chain of 3 instead of chain of 5 at the start of the row. And then our second decrease at the end of each decrease row is made by double crocheting 2 stitches together. So now I'm gonna do my next few decrease rows off camera since I'm gonna be doing it the same way that I've just explained. And remember that the amount of decreases is totally up to you, but I'm gonna be doing a total of 4 decrease rows like the white top that I showed earlier, which means that I will be doing 1 more regular row, 1 more decrease row, 1 more regular row, and 1 more decrease row. And I'm gonna be doing all of that off camera, and then I'll come back once I'm ready to show you the next step. I just reached the end of my last decrease row, and like I mentioned earlier, I've crocheted a total of 4 decrease rows. Now for the rest of this panel, I'm going to be crocheting regular rows, so no more decreases or any other sort of shaping. So I'm just going to bring in my other top here to show you what we're going to be doing next. So when comparing to my completed mesh top here, this section here is the same as this section here. So this part of the top is where we decreased, and now from this point on, we're just gonna be doing regular rows. So from where I'm at now with the yellow top, I'm just gonna be crocheting from here to here. And I'm gonna quickly show you how to determine the length of this section. So the length of this section right here. So we're gonna take our measuring tape and we're gonna measure from the top of our shoulder right here. And if you're wearing a shirt that has a seam here at the top, if you see here, you can measure from this point here. That's just kind of an easier way to do it. So we're gonna measure from here. So I'm putting the start of my measuring tape at this point here, and I'm gonna measure all the way down to the center of my underarm. So the center of my underarm, so right here. And this measurement for me ends up being 7 inches long, like exactly. So this is my measurement right here. So this measurement right here is how long we want to make the upper section of each one of our panels from the start of our armhole shaping to the very top of each panel right up here. So going forward, for the rest of our panel, we're just gonna be crocheting regular rows, and I am going to crochet the amount that gives me 7 inches from my underarm to the very top. I have crocheted a total of 12 regular rows after my last decrease row right here. So after my last decrease row, I crocheted a total of 12 regular rows from here to here. So now I'm gonna take my measuring tape and I'm gonna measure to see if from the start of our armhole shaping here, from here to here, measures up to 7 inches, which is the measurement that I want my top to be. So if I measure from the top here, so this is where I started the armhole shaping right here. And it almost lines up perfectly with the 7-inch measurement. So now that this section here is as long as I want it to be, that means that this whole back panel here is fully completed. So after finishing the last row of this panel, we're gonna cut the yarn and fasten off. So I'm just gonna hook my yarn and pull it through the loop. So this is what the back panel looks like, fully done. It's looking nice. Now I'm gonna start the front panel. So we're gonna do the front panel the same way we did the back panel, except for the neckline. So for the back panel here, the very top of the panel right here, we didn't do any sort of shaping for the neckline. It just kind of goes straight across. But for the front panel, we're gonna do a little bit of shaping here at the very top. So I'm gonna start my front panel. I'm gonna do all of that off camera since I'm gonna be doing it the same way I did the back panel. But then I'll come back once I've reached the neckline so that I can show you exactly how to do the shaping for the neckline of the front panel. So like I mentioned earlier, my back panel is a total of 39 rows long in length from top to bottom. And I just finished row 35 of my front panel here. And with just 4 rows left to do in order to reach the same length as my back panel, I'm now going to start creating the neckline on my front panel. So to create the neckline, I'm going to be working the sides of my top right here. So just right here, creating what will sort of look like straps right on the sides here, leaving enough space in between the straps right here for our head to go through. And each one of these little straps that we're going to be making on the side here is going to be a total of 4 rows in length, so that once I'm done crocheting the straps, the front panel with its neckline shaping will have the same amount of rows in length as my back panel. Hopefully that makes sense, but now I'm going to show you how to do the straps slash neckline shaping. So the next step is figuring out how thick to make each one of our straps, as well as figuring out the size of our neckline. And personally, I want my top to have the smallest neckline possible while still being able to get it over my head. But it's up to you how big you want your neckline to be, but I'm gonna show you how to figure this out. So you wanna take both your panels, so your front panel and back panel here, and hold them up so that they're perfectly aligned from corner to corner at the top right here. And the way that I'm gonna be figuring out the size of my neckline is I'm just gonna be throwing this over my head and kind of measure the length around my head. If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. So right now I'm holding each corner of each panel, and from both corners, I'm just gonna move in 4 squares. So let's start with this side right here. I'm holding both corners right here, and I'm just gonna move in 4 squares. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm just gonna pinch this spot right here and hold it. And I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. So I'm just going 1, 2, 3, 4. And you want to make sure that both panels are perfectly aligned with one another. And next up, we're going to be flipping this over our head, but we want to make sure that we're holding our fingers in place like this, pinched in that same spot that I showed you earlier as we flip this over our head and measure around our head. I'm just going to show you what I mean. So I'm just going to flip this on, and hopefully you can see, but I am still holding my fingers in place right here, and I'm going to try to see if this will fit over my head. And as I'm just fitting this over my head right here, I can feel that it's pretty tight. So when holding my fingers 4 mesh stitch squares in from the sides, this hole right here was pretty tight, but this will stretch out a little bit, and as we create our neckline, it will add a little length. And since I want my neckline to be as small as I can possibly make it, I'm going to go 1 stitch further. So I'm going to, where both my fingers are, I'm gonna move in 1 more stitch on both sides. So now I've moved in 5 stitches on both sides, and you wanna make sure that you have the same amount on both sides. And I'm gonna measure it over my head once again. I feel like this is gonna be a little too tight. It won't really fit over my head. Yeah. Oh, actually, it might just fit, but it is looking pretty tight. But like I mentioned, it will stretch, and since each strap that we're doing on the sides of the neckline is gonna be 4 inches in length, it's also gonna add a little bit more room to our neckline. So I'm gonna go with the 5 stitches on both sides right here. So just a little bit of a recap here if I show you. So holding both corners here, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 stitches right here on both sides. So I'm going to take my front panel here, and I'm going to place my stitch markers where I want to make my little straps to create the neckline. So I'm going to take my first stitch marker here, and I'm going to place it 5 stitches down from the very top corner here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm just going to place it in this double crochet stitch to mark my spot. So this is where we're going to be making the strap. So we're going to be crocheting it along 5 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side of the front panel. So from this other top corner here, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches and place it into the double crochet. So I've marked this side the same way I marked the other side, and this is going to be where we're going to crochet the other strap. So now I'm going to show you how to crochet the straps. So for each one of our straps right here that we're going to be crocheting on the sides, we're going to be doing a total of 2 decreases when working along this side of the straps. And we're going to be doing that in order to create a curved neckline so that it's not boxy like it's going to be like a nice curved neckline. So this right here is the end of row 35 for me, but you will most likely have a different amount of rows. So the only thing you really want to pay attention to is that it's 4 rows less than your back panel. So whatever amount of rows you have for your back panel, subtract 4 from that, and that should be the row that you're on right now. So now I'm going to start my strap. So I'm going to make a chain of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Turn my work around. Yarn over and insert into the next double crochet stitch and double crochet, chain 2, insert into the next double crochet, and do that again. We're just working our regular mesh stitch here. Okay, and I've just stopped at this point here, so I have 3 mesh stitches plus chain 2, but I'm getting close to my stitch marker here, which indicates the end of the row since we're just working our straps right now. But like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be doing a decrease along the neckline right here. So our next stitch here is actually going to be a decrease stitch. So I'm going to yarn over, insert into the next double crochet stitch, pull up a loop, and now I have 3 loops on my hook here, and now I'm going to insert my hook into the next double crochet stitch, pull up a loop, and now I have 4 loops on my hook, and I'm going to hook my yarn, pull it through the first 3 loops, then hook my yarn again and pull it through the last 2 loops. And there's our decrease. So now I went from having 5 stitches to 4 stitches. So now I'm going to be turning around and working back down this row, but I want my first stitch of my next row going this way to be a decrease. So instead of making a chain of 5 for a regular mesh stitch, I'm going to make a chain of 3. So 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to turn my work around, I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into the next double crochet stitch and double crochet. And that there is our second decrease for the neckline. And as you can see, it's already starting to create a little bit of a curve here as we decrease inwards. And now I'm just going to work my way down the rest of this row. So chain 2, insert into the next stitch and double crochet, chain 2, insert and double crochet. So I've just completed the first 2 rows of my strap right here, and I only want to do a total of 2 decreases for my strap. So for the next 2 remaining rows, I'm just going to crochet the 3 stitches here and not do any more decreases. So I'm going to make a chain of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I'm going to turn my work around. And I'm just going to work these 3 stitches here because this one right here is a decrease. Okay, I'm just inserting into the last stitch of this row. Okay, so that's 3 stitches. And now I'm going to make a chain of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn my work around and work my last row. So since this was my last row, I'm going to cut my yarn, but I'm actually going to leave a nice long tail. So I'm leaving a nice long tail here because I want to use this yarn for sewing. And I'm going to hook my yarn, pull it through to fasten off. And there we have our first strap. So this right here marked where we started. So this strap is a total of 4 rows long. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's got a nice curved edge right here. So now we're gonna start our second strap on this side right here. Okay, so to start the second strap, we're gonna have to work in new yarn since we don't have any working yarn right here. So I'm gonna be starting right in this corner right here. So on this side and working this way for the first row. So I'm gonna insert my hook into the 3rd chain to the right. So 1, 2, and insert into the 3rd right here. I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to loop it onto my hook and pull through. And this is our starting point. So now I'm going to make a chain of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yarn over and insert into the next stitch right here. And double crochet. And now I'm going to make a chain of 2, 1, 2, yarn over, insert into the next stitch. So we're just doing our regular stitches here. And once we've crocheted the 3 squares right here, we're going to make a chain of 2 and we're going to decrease. So yarn over, insert into the next stitch, pull up a loop until we have 3 loops on our hook. And now I'm going to insert into the next stitch, pull up a loop, and now I have 4 loops on my hook here, and I'm going to hook my yarn and pull it through the first 3 loops, and I'm going to hook my yarn again and pull it through the last 2 loops. And there is our first decrease. So now I have 4 mesh stitches here. And now for the next row, we're going to start with a decrease the same way we did for the first strap. So I'm going to make a chain of 3. 1, 2, and 3. Turn my work around, yarn over, and insert into the next double crochet stitch. And there we have our second decrease stitch. So our first decrease, our second decrease, and now I'm going to work my way down the rest of this row, doing our regular mesh stitch. So I've just completed the first 2 rows of the second strap here, and just like the first strap that we did, we only want to do 2 decrease stitches on the inside here. So now for the next 2 rows, I'm just going to crochet 3 stitches. So 3 stitches down this way, turn back around and do another 3 stitches. I also want to add that if you have more or less than 3 squares at the top of your strap, that's okay. Honestly, it's to be expected. I end up with 3 squares based on the measurement that I took from my neckline, and the amount of squares that you end up with at the top of your strap will be determined by your own measurement. And now that I've just finished the last row, I'm going to cut my yarn, but again, I'm going to leave myself lots of extra yarn to use for sewing. And there we have the second strap. So now that we have finished both panels, we're now going to sew both panels together. And if you did everything correctly, then both panels should have the same amount of rows from top to bottom. So for my top, I have a total of 39 rows this way. And for the back panel, those 39 rows stretch from this straight edge at the top right here down to the straight edge at the bottom. But for the front panel, since we have our curved neckline here, the 39 rows is counted from the very top of this strap right here and down to the straight edge of the front panel. So now I'm going to show you where we're going to be sewing our panels. So we're going to sew along the 3 stitches of our little strap here. We're going to sew it against 3 stitches of the back panel right here. And same thing on this other side here, just the very top. And then we're going to sew the sides right here, starting from these corners right here and downwards. So this right here, we're not going to be sewing because this is where our arm is going to go through. So this needs to be left open for our armhole. So we're going to be starting at the bottom of the armhole right here and sewing downwards to the bottom of each panel right here. So I'm going to take my darning needle and I'm going to start by sewing this section right here. And I'm gonna take this piece of yarn right here, I left it nice and long for the sewing portion, and I'm gonna thread it through my darning needle. And now I'm gonna sew along this row right here. So our very top row of our little strap here, along the very top of the 3 stitches right here of the back panel. And we wanna make sure that they're perfectly aligned. And now I'm just going to insert my needle, and I'm just gonna sew some basic stitches here. But it's really important that we make sure that our stitches are aligned on each one of our panels so that you don't get any bunching up or it doesn't look crooked. So see how the first square of both panels is completely overlapping. You wanna make sure that you keep it that way as you sew along the entire 3 stitches at the top here. Once we reach the very end, so I've just sewed along the 3 stitches here, I'm now going to tie a knot. I'm actually going to tie more than 1 knot. I'm going to tie about 2 or 3 of them, just to make sure that it's secure. And now I'm just going to weave in my end. And just to make it extra secure, I'm just going to tie another knot. I just always get so paranoid that my ends are gonna come loose and then my top is gonna fall apart. So I just kind of go a little overboard with the knots here and just weave it in one more time. And now I'm just going to cut the end, and there we go. So I've just finished sewing along one side of the neckline right here. And now I'm going to sew along the other side. So I'm gonna sew the top of this second little strap right here onto the top of this back panel right here. Again, making sure that the 3 stitches align. So this is the top corner of each one of my panels, and the 3 stitches align. And now I'm going to take the yarn that is still attached to one of my corners here, and I'm gonna thread it through my darning needle. And I'm just gonna sew along the very top of these 3 stitches right here, the same way that I did for the first strap. Okay, so I just finished sewing down the 3 squares, so now I'm just gonna tie my knot, or should I say my multiple knots, cut the end. So now I have just finished sewing both straps at the top here, and now you can see that we have a neckline. So this is the hole that our head goes through at the top. So now that I've finished sewing this upper section right here, I'm now gonna start sewing the sides from here to here. Okay, so I just wanna show you this real quick before I finish sewing like the sides at the top here. So I have the top part sewn already. So now you see we have this hole in the center for our head to go through, and I'm just gonna throw this over my head again just to show you. Remember earlier when I first was like measuring out the neckline and I made it really, really tight, it wouldn't even go over my head because I mentioned like it stretches out a little bit, and since the straps are like 4 rows long, it kind of adds to the size of the neckline here. I'm just gonna show you when I put this over my head now, it does actually fit over my head, and it's not nearly as tight. It's actually like not very tight at all. So yeah, I honestly could have made it even smaller if I wanted to, but after I finish sewing the sides here, and when I'm going to be adding a collar around the neckline, and at that point you can always kind of add a few decreases or skip a stitch or 2 here and there to kind of cinch it in a little bit, which I will most likely be doing. But now I'm going to start sewing these sides here. Okay, so I'm going to be sewing the sides of the top. And I'm gonna start from this point here and work downwards, because when making these tops in the past, I've actually started from down here and worked my way upwards, but then I kind of zoned out and wasn't really paying attention and ended up sewing all the way up here and sewing this little armhole closed, which you definitely don't want to do because we need this open for our arms to go through. So I'm gonna start at this corner right here. And again, we really want to make sure that both panels are perfectly aligned. Also, we want to thread our darning needle with some yarn here. And I'm just taking this yarn from my ball of yarn since I don't have any long enough ends attached to my my panels that I can use. This is the base of the armhole. So now I'm just going to start sewing both sections together, and you want to make sure, I know I keep saying it, but it is so important. You want to make sure that both panels are perfectly aligned as you sew. So we're pretty much just doing some basic stitches again, the same way we sewed the upper part of the panels. And it's just the same thing over and over again. I'm just gonna sew these sections off camera, and then I'll come back once I have finished. So I finished sewing both panels together, and this is what it looks like on. So I only have one thing left to do for this top now, which is adding the collar around the neckline right here. So I'm just gonna add a collar like this. But I just wanted to show you what it looks like on before I add the collar, to show you that this top also looks really nice without a collar. It just looks like a cute little tank top. So you have the option of not adding a collar, and this is what it would look like if you choose to do that. But if you want to add a collar, then stick around for just a little bit longer, because now I'm going to show you how to add the collar. So this is the front of my top right here, and I know that because of this little curved neckline here. So I'm going to flip my top the other way. And we're gonna start our collar on the back right here, since we're gonna have to feed in new yarn and then fasten off at the end of our collar, and we want all those ends to be at the back of the top and not the front, just because it looks better that way. So I'm gonna take my hook and I'm gonna take my yarn, and now I'm just going to start in the center of the back right here. It doesn't have to be directly in the center, but just as much in the center as you can make it. Gonna insert my hook into the top of a double crochet in the back of the top right here. I'm just gonna choose this double crochet right here. Gonna insert my hook, and now we're gonna take our yarn and we're gonna loop it onto our hook like that and pull it through the top of the double crochet and pull up a loop. So now I'm gonna take the tail end of my yarn and make sure I'm not working with that end, and I'm gonna be working with the end of the yarn that's connected to the ball here. And now I'm gonna start working the collar. So I'm gonna start by making a chain of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I'm gonna work my way down here and all around the entire neckline. So after our chain of 5, I'm gonna yarn over, and I'm gonna insert into the top of the next double crochet right here, and double crochet. And now I'm gonna chain 2, 1, 2, yarn over, insert into the top of the next double crochet, and double crochet. So we're just working our mesh stitch as usual. So that's what that's looking like so far. I have 2 squares so far, but my next stitch, I'm actually gonna do a decrease, because I want to do at least like 3 to 4 decreases for my collar. You don't have to do that. It just depends on how tight or wide you want your neckline to be. Like, I want mine to be as snug as I can make it, and right now my neckline's a little bigger than I want it to be, so I'm gonna throw in a few decreases when making my collar, but I'm just gonna be adding them when I'm working the back of the neckline so that it won't be as noticeable. I don't want my decreases to be visible, so yeah, so 1, 2. I'm just gonna throw in a few decreases in the back here. I just wanted to show you guys, but that's not something that you have to do. It's just an option. I think I'm gonna throw in another decrease here. So remember, our decreases is just almost like double crocheting 2 stitches together. It's the same thing as what we did earlier when creating the shaping for our neckline. Alright, so looking back, I have done a total of 2 decreases so far in the back. That's all I'm gonna do for now, and then I'm gonna add maybe 1 or 2 more once I kind of make my way all the way around and reach the other side, where I'll add 1 or 2 more decreases in the back again. So we're pretty much just gonna be doing the same thing as the rest of the top, just working our regular mesh stitch for the entire collar along the entire neckline. So it's pretty straightforward until we get to this section right here where we did the decreases for this little strap on the side of the neckline here. So I'm gonna do the next few stitches that are pretty straightforward off camera, and then I'll come back once I reach these stitches here. So I just reached the point of the neckline. That's not as straightforward as the rest of the neckline, and it's where we did the decreases here. Since there's no exact place to insert into, we just want to continue crocheting the mesh stitch, but making it as even as possible. But it's not going to be exactly even, but we're going to do our best to make it as even as we can. So I'm just going to show you as I do it. So I'm going to chain 2, just crocheting the regular mesh stitch. So this right here looks like the right place to insert into. And now this section right here, I'm just gonna maybe insert into this section. It's not proper stitch, but it'll work. And I'm just checking to see it still looks even. We want these squares around this section here to look as similar in size as the rest of our mesh stitch, so it blends in nicely. It still looks pretty good. A little bit of a different size going on here, but not too noticeable. Just gonna continue down. All right, so I've just made it down the little tricky section here, and everything's looking pretty even. So now I'm just gonna continue working my way down the front of the neckline. So yeah, I just wanted to show you that, just to show you that when working along the decrease section of the neckline, it's not super straightforward, like where you're inserting your hook. There's no like specific stitches to insert into. Just try to make it as even as you possibly can, but there's no like, you can kind of play around with it. Okay, so I just reached the decrease part on the other side of the neckline, and I'm just gonna do this section on camera. So again, I'm just kind of inserting randomly for this section the same way I did last time. Just trying to get it as even as possible. Pretty much made it back to regular stitches. There might be one more awkward one left. I'm actually going to take this opportunity to add in a decrease here. So I'm going to combine these two stitches together by just going in here, but then in here and decreasing. And that's what that looks like. Okay, I'm gonna continue. So 1 stitch, 2 stitch, and now I'm gonna add another decrease, I think. Yeah. I'll add in another one. Last decrease of this collar. Okay, so I've made my way back to the start right here. So this is where we started with our chain of 5, and this is where I am right now. And I've just reached the end of the first row of the collar. So now I need to join in the round. So I need to join this stitch right here, since the next double crochet is this one right here that has the chain of 5 coming out of it. So that's how I know that I've reached the end of row 1 of the collar. So now I need to join in the round. So I'm going to insert my hook into the space right here, and I'm going to slip stitch. And by doing that, I have now joined in the round, and that's what that looks like. And now I'm going to start row 2. Well, technically round 2, since we're working in the round now. So to start round 2, we're going to make a chain of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now this is super important. We have to turn our work around. So I need to turn my work completely around. And now we're going to be working in the opposite direction. So I'm going to be working down this way. So now I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to insert my hook into the next double crochet stitch. So I'm going to insert into this stitch right here, which was a decrease in the previous round. So that's why it looks a little funky there. So I'm going to insert and double crochet. And that's what that looks like. This mesh stitch right here is looking a little wide, but it's okay because it's in the back so no one can see. Let's continue crocheting our mesh stitch. So this round is going to be a lot easier because we're pretty much just crocheting mesh stitches all the way around, and there's not going to be any awkward parts like the previous row, like the first row of the collar. So we're just working our mesh stitch all the way around until we reach the start of round 2. So I'm going to do all that off camera, and then I'll come back once I've reached the end of round 2. I just reached the end of my second round of the collar, and now I'm going to join the round once again the same way that I joined the first round, and I'm going to do that by inserting my hook into the space here and crochet a slip stitch to join in the round, and that's what that looks like. And now I'm going to start round 3 the same way that I started round 2 by making a chain of 5, turning my work around, and working down in the other direction. So yarn over, insert into the next stitch. So I'm just going to work the next couple rows off camera, just because it's pretty straightforward. It's the same, I'm going to be doing the same thing that I just showed you for round 2. And I'm thinking of doing probably 5 rounds in total for my collar, but I'm gonna see as I go, but I'll come back once I've reached my final round, and yeah, and then I'll show you how many rounds I've done at that point. So I ended up doing a total of 5 rows for my collar, and I'm just at the end of my 5th row here, so I'm just going to join in the round as per usual with a slip stitch. And now I'm going to cut my yarn, but not too short, and fasten off. So I'm going to hook my yarn and pull it through the loop. And now we are done crocheting the top. Now I just have to weave in a few ends here, which I'm going to do off camera. It's pretty straightforward. Just weave it in the same way that we did for the few other areas on this top. And then I'll come back to show you the final results. This is what the top looks like on. I love it. Every time I finish making one of these, I'm just amazed each time. I love these tops so much. First of all, they work up so fast, which is great, and I feel like they're very practical, at least for me. Like, this is something that I'll definitely wear out. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go over a few things really quickly. So you know, when I was making the collar, I mentioned that I did a few decreases to kind of cinch in the collar a little bit. So I ended up doing, I think, 4 decreases, and it worked so well. So before, the neckline was a little looser than I wanted it to be, but now, if you look closely, it's a lot more cinched in, which I love. So if you choose to do some decreases for your collar to cinch it in a little bit, just make sure after doing your first round that you try it on, just to make sure that you can get it over your head before you proceed to like finish making the whole collar, and then realize afterwards that it is too small. So yeah, highly recommend doing the decreases along the collar though, but that's totally optional. I think I covered everything for how to make this top, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments. This is my first proper tutorial for a crochet garment, so I would love to hear your feedback. If there's anything that you liked, or if there's anything that you don't like. I would also love to hear if there's anything that you wish I would have included in this tutorial so that I can continue to improve my tutorials in the future. But that's all from me, so I'm gonna end this video now, but thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye!